Well, with the first pictures from the Event Horizon Telescope released today in the U.S. Senate Armed Services Committee holding a hearing on President Trump's potential Space Force tomorrow, it seems that for better or for worse, humanity is taking its first steps towards a future in space. But are some of the biggest mysteries facing our civilization today still to be found on Earth? A new book out now in the UK and released later this month in the US alleges that scientists and archaeologists have for decades overlooked more than 100,000 years of American prehistory that could reveal the secrets of our species' origin and shine a light on the true extent of American colonial genocide. The book is America Before the Key to Earth's Lost Civilization, and its best-selling author, Graham Hancock, joins me now. Graham, welcome back to Going Underground.
Thank you.
I've got to ask you, we've been told for years that there's no point, really, from an archaeological perspective in talking about the Americas. Why is this book so big, America Before?
Well, you see, it was a long-held view. It's unfortunate to say this about something that defines itself as a science, but archaeology is very dogmatic. And it was a dogmatic view held for more than 50 years, from the 1960s right through until past 2010, that the first human beings to enter the Americas had come in about 13,400 years ago.
Across to Alaska.
Through Alaska, through the Bering then land bridge, and into North America, and then into South America. And this was a doctrine. It was called Clovis First. And actually any archaeologist, and I can give you a number of examples like Jacques Cinq-Mars, who excavated Bluefish Caves in the Yukon, any archaeologist who came across a site where humans were older than 13,400 years was viciously attacked, like, as though the archaeological community was a pack of hyenas. They just descended on these dissenting voices and utterly destroyed their careers and withdrew their research.
You say in the book, the editor of Nature, one of the premier scholastic magazines, characterized it as bullying and aggression against people who'd wanted to...
Exactly. Terrible bullying and aggression. And I often try to figure out why this is. And I think maybe it is a natural human instinct to be territorial. And if your territory, your intellectual territory, is a particular idea about the past, you're going to tend to resist any ideas that contradict that. And if the stronger the ideas are, the stronger your resistance is going to be. And this, unfortunately, is the case, that for more than 50 years, evidence of humans in America much older than 13,400 years ago was simply dismissed, and anybody who attempted to go that way would not get research funding and would be ostracized by their colleagues and literally have their lives ruined. And this is most unfortunate, and it's not how science should proceed, because we now know that human beings have been in the Americas for tens of thousands of years before 13,400 years ago. In fact, the latest evidence puts them back more than 130,000 years in the Americas. And what that says to me is, if they were saying before that humans didn't come until 13,400 years ago and nobody should look, nobody should dig deeper, now we know they were there 130,000 years ago. That's more than 100,000 years of the American story that has not been told entirely because of the dogmatism of archaeology. And now reluctantly they're having to accept, all of the institutions are accepting, well, we're sorry, we got it wrong. But it's not just a matter of getting it wrong. It's a grave responsibility to be the profession that interprets the prehistory of humanity to the modern world. And it's a betrayal of that responsibility to be so dogmatic and to refuse to consider any possibility which doesn't fit with one's preconceived notions. And, you know, the net result is that we're left with 100,000 years of North American prehistory, which has been completely unstudied, and they're only now beginning to study it. And the evidence that's coming out, both in North America and South America, is absolutely stunning. All the old preconceptions are being
Who benefited, though, apart from this professional class of archaeologists? And I know it's very multidisciplinary, this book, as you are saying, not just archaeology, genetics, biology,
yes, but
and also...
the new science in genetics is one of the things that's breaking the logjam, because genetic evidence is coming up which can't be explained by the pre-existing paradigm. For example, the pre-existing paradigm held that human beings had only entered America one way, that they'd come up through North Asia into Siberia, across the Bering Straits, which were then a land bridge, down through North America and on into South America. The problem that DNA has thrown up is that we have a very strong genetic relationship between Australasians, Aborigines and Melanesian people from Papua New Guinea, and certain tribes in the Amazon jungle. Now, if you could find that DNA footprint in Central America and in North America as well, it wouldn't challenge the existing dogma. But you can't. You only find it in the Amazon, and that rules out any possibility that they could have migrated through North and Central America to get to South America. They had to have crossed the Pacific Ocean. And furthermore, because very ancient skeletal material has been found containing this DNA, we know that this happened during the last ice age. So and this is horror for archaeologists, that humans could cross an ocean like the Pacific during the last ice age. They regarded it as absolutely impossible.
Graham, I'll stop you there. More from Graham Hancock after this break. Welcome back. I'm still with Graham Hancock. You have made it your life's work to, if some of the 9 million people who haven't read your books are watching, we still don't really understand or officially understand why civilizations have all grew up at the same time in different parts of the earth.
No, we don't.
But that's just a mystery. Whereas your life work is to say there is a reason.
Well, my life's work has been to say that there's a forgotten episode in human history, and that once we take that forgotten episode into account, a high civilization, as many of the myths and traditions of the world attest, that existed during the Ice Age and was destroyed in the cataclysms that brought the last Ice Age to an end. I feel that that's a very neglected possibility by archaeology. Not just neglected, just absolutely ignored as a possibility. And I felt that my role has been to present solid, well-researched, thoroughly documented evidence which challenges that idea. Because if we are missing a very big part of our story, then we don't know who we are. We are lost in the modern world, and that's why I say it's a grave responsibility to be an archaeologist and to interpret the past to the present, because our ideas of who we are come from the story we've been told about that past. And now we know that an enormous area of the world, the whole of the Americas, was completely ignored, and it may, in fact, have been the center of the origins of civilization. I have a book in my shelves called History Begins at Sumer in Mesopotamia between the Tigris and the Euphrates River, and that's been the idea of archaeology for a very long time, that civilization began in the Middle East, in Mesopotamia. But that idea
simultaneously in others.
And then all over the world. But what's beginning to change that is evidence, much earlier evidence of civilization, as we would call it. For example, Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. And it's pushing the date back right to the edge of the last ice age. And those very early sites show evidence of great advanced technology. And the only possible explanation, as far as I'm concerned, is that they inherited a legacy from an even earlier civilization.
To which, of course, scholarly archaeologists have long said about your work, okay, what destroyed it then? But
yes.
Now new evidence, which you go through in this book again, has emerged of what could have destroyed it, a comet.
And again, yes, and the archaeologists hate this idea as well, but this idea is coming from more than 60 major mainstream scientists, oceanographers, geophysicists, geologists, who've been looking at a very peculiar layer in the Earth that is called the Younger Dryas boundary layer. And it's also called the black mat because it's full of soot and evidence of intense wildfires burning. And right at the base of the black mat are all kinds of minerals and chemicals that can only in abundance be caused by a comet hitting the Earth. And that's iridium, that's melt glass, that's carbon microspherules, that's nanodiamonds, which are physically created by the heat and shock of the impact. And these are distributed across tens of millions of square miles of the Earth's surface, and they all date to 12,800 years ago. And undoubtedly there was a cataclysm then. Actually, nobody denies that, because that's the time that the megafauna went extinct. The mammoths, the dire wolves, you know, the saber-toothed tigers, the mastodons, they all went down at that time. And up till now, the explanation has been, oh, human beings must have made them extinct.
Overhunting.
Overhunting, although I cannot conceive of a single hunter-gatherer group that would willfully wipe out its entire prey animal. Hunter-gatherers are actually very protective of the species they hunt. They don't wipe them out. That's always been a bad idea, the notion of the overkill hypothesis. And well, now we have
it's an environmental question at the moment.
It also raises environmental questions, and then there are interests that people seek to protect in that area as well. But now we have this massive new evidence. They've been steadily publishing in major mainstream journals since 2007. The latest papers just came out a month ago in 2019, and the overwhelming mass of that evidence just is irresistible. We must confront the fact that there has been a hidden hand in human history, and that hidden hand appears to have been a comet, which was originally up to 100 miles in diameter, which came in from deep space, from the Oort cloud or the Kuiper belt, entered an Earth-crossing orbit within the solar system, began to break up into multiple fragments. 12,800 years ago, at least 4 of those fragments hit the ice cap that then covered Greenland and North America, causing a massive global cataclysm, releasing a huge amount of meltwater into the world ocean and bringing global temperatures down suddenly. Huge, dramatic climate change. Now we know why it happened.
Okay,
it happened because of a comet impact.
I want to get on to the pretty grim implications of that. Why do you think that, aside from this, in a sense, the cover-up of, let alone Native American sites, why would so many people be covering up the evidence of earlier civilizations in the Americas? I think some people have called it a colonial cover-up, a colonial archaeological conspiracy.
There's 2 sides to this story. In one side of the story is the way America was conquered by basically Anglo-Saxons. And in that conquest of the Americas, what they confronted was an indigenous people who had inhabited that realm for tens of thousands of years, we now know. And the first thing they did was to attempt to exterminate them physically, to get them out of the way. And when that became objectionable, the next measure was to exterminate their culture, to rub it out, to pour scorn upon it, to say that it was of no value, that in a sense, the absurd and monstrous argument was that the Native Americans deserved what was done to them because they were supposedly not capable of any high culture. We now know that that's completely untrue, and that was a conspiracy. That was a conspiracy to destroy Native American culture and thus to legitimize the conquest and the massive theft of land. And it carried on into the 20th century with the so-called boarding schools, where Native American children, almost all of them, were taken away from their families.
We've talked about
hundreds of miles away and put in schools and taught that their culture was rubbish and indoctrinated with Western
We've actually
culture.
talked about them on this program, but I mean, in the book you say that you use the work of UCLA's Professor David Wilkinson, that the so-called Amazonian cities,
Yes.
so London around the 16th century, 60,000 population, there were cities there.
There were enormous cities in the Amazon. This is another piece of the new evidence that's overwhelming the old ideas. Because the old idea was that there were no humans in the Amazon until about 1,000 years ago, that the Amazon, although it's a luxuriant rainforest, has poor soils, and that it was impossible for human beings in large numbers to survive there. We now know they did, and the reason we know they did is tragically because of the clearances of the Amazon. So much of the Amazon has been cut down, and in those areas that have been cut down, evidence of enormous cities has emerged, cities with populations of tens of thousands, bigger than London at the same time. And not only that, but evidence of high science, geometric geoglyphs on the Earth on a scale of hundreds of meters, squares, circles. They even performed the exercise that we attribute to the ancient Greeks of squaring the circle, a very sophisticated geometrical exercise. You can see that done on a scale of hundreds of meters in the Amazon.
So is the point that we do have some of the information from this wiped out civilization because, and it should be added, not everyone was killed by the comet.
No, not everyone was killed.
Hunter-gatherers were okay.
Just as we live today in a world where there are hunter-gatherers in the Amazon who don't even know we exist. There are hunter-gatherers in Namibia who live a full hunter-gatherer lifestyle. They know we exist, but they choose to perpetuate their lifestyle. They are coexisting with an advanced civilization, so-called, ours. And I suggest it was exactly the same during the Ice Age, that there was an advanced civilization on the planet, as many myths and traditions suggest, that it coexisted with hunter-gatherers. But who survived the cataclysm in the largest numbers were not the members of the advanced civilization. Just as I believe we would not survive such a cataclysm today. We're not psychologically prepared for a disaster. We're the spoilt children of the earth. We are used to having clothes on our backs, roofs over our head, plentiful supplies of food in the supermarket. You stop that dead in its tracks, and within a matter of weeks there would be traumatic shock and chaos and disorder. People from advanced civilizations actually do not have survival skills. But people who are hunter-gatherers are masters of survival. So it's not surprising that it's the hunter-gatherers who survived in the largest number. But what I evidence in this book, what I document in this book, is that there were survivors of a more advanced civilization, and they took refuge amongst hunter-gatherers. And they then tried to teach them what they knew and hoped to recreate or restart their civilization again.
And quite apart from the lies you've exposed,
I wouldn't want to call them lies. I don't think that the archaeologists have deliberately lied. I want to be clear about that. I think, honestly speaking, that the majority of archaeologists who held to that old model that has now been completely discredited honestly believed what they were saying to be true. They felt that that's what the evidence said. And then their careers became connected to that idea, and they became very reluctant to accept any idea that threatened that. And I think it's more that natural territoriality of human beings rather than a deliberate attempt to hide the truth of the past from us. But the effect has been as overwhelming or worse than a deliberate attempt to cover up the past, because 100,000 years of the human story has just been completely shut down until now.
And aside from finding out who we are, there's obviously trillions spent on military technology. You think we should be spending on some kind of protection, certainly from...
I certainly do.
Things that can destroy us.
I certainly do. It's one of the things that frustrates and annoys me, that we can create massive scientific endeavors. We can raise enormous amounts of money to fund weapons of mass destruction so that we can invent ever more sophisticated ways to murder one another as a species. But when it comes to protecting the Earth from environmental threats, when it comes to protecting the Earth from, for example, a comet impact, we're not interested at all. And the thing is that we could do that. And the key point that I really need to make is that that original giant comet that broke up into multiple fragments that caused a cataclysm 12,800 years ago, huge bits of it are still in orbit in the Taurid meteor stream, which the Earth passes through twice a year. And it is regarded by responsible astronomers as the most grave collision hazard facing the Earth at the present time. And it doesn't need to be gloom and doom. All we need to do is take all that ingenuity, all that money, all that power that we now put into weapons of mass destruction and turn it towards protection of the Earth. Because these events, when they happen, are world-changing. Do we really want to see the end of our civilization? Because that's what's in the offing, unless we do something about this. But the good news is we can do something about it. My goodness, the economic interests are already talking about mining asteroids. The technology exists to do that. You can mine an asteroid, you can move it.
And just finally, obviously, if we get past October and the Taurids, then your work has depended on scholars coming out with paper after paper since you were last on. So much new information that has supported your original thesis.
Yeah.
What next, do you think? It's very difficult
I think we are poised on the edge of what is called in science a paradigm shift. I think that the monolithic control of the past that archaeology has exercised is being eaten away by new sciences like genetics and indeed geology. And the result of that is that all the evidence that's coming out shows that the human species is much older than we thought, that their abilities were much more advanced than we thought, that whole areas of the world that have never been studied by archaeologists at all may have been the source of an advanced civilization in the past. The evidence keeps on mounting up. It won't go away. I keep thinking I'm finished with this story. I thought I was finished with this story in 2002 after a book called Underworld, and then Göbekli Tepe came along, and I needed to write Magicians of the Gods. And then after publishing Magicians of the Gods in 2015, there's just massive amount of new evidence from the Americas showing that the whole story of the peopling of the Americas were wrong, and that the Americas are full of cunningly designed, highly scientific monuments, geometry, astronomy on an extraordinary scale that speaks to enormously sophisticated people.
Graham Hancock, thank you.